Every day after school, 8-year-old Emma saw the same old man sitting alone on the park bench, feeding pigeons and watching the world go by. The other kids called him weird and creepy, but something about his gentle eyes made Emma curious. When she finally worked up the courage to ask him about the small pin on his jacket, his answer would teach her the most important lesson of her young life and shock an entire neighborhood. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because stories like this one that show us how wrong we can be about the people around us are exactly what honor reward is all about. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never walk past anyone without wondering about their story. Maple Park sits in the heart of Greenfield, a suburban neighborhood where perfectly manicured lawns meet tree-lined sidewalks and children's laughter echoes from playground equipment that was installed when the community was young and optimistic. The park itself is modest: a few benches, a playground with swings and slides, a basketball court where teenagers gather on weekends, and a small duck pond that attracts families with young children who come to feed the waterfowl. It's the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where parents feel safe letting their children play while they chat with neighbors, and where the biggest concern is usually whether the city will remember to mow the grass or repair the broken swing that's been squeaking for months. For the past 3 years, one particular bench has been occupied by the same person every single day, weather permitting, and sometimes even when the weather doesn't permit. An elderly man sits on the bench closest to the playground, quietly observing the daily rhythms of community life. His name is William Bill Harrison, though nobody in the neighborhood knows that. To them, he's simply the old man on the bench, a fixture that has become part of the landscape, like the oak trees or the memorial plaque near the flagpole that most people walk past without reading. Bill is 78 years old, with silver hair that he keeps neatly combed despite having nowhere particular to go, and no one particular to impress. He wears the same type of clothes every day: clean khaki pants, a button-down shirt that's seen better years but is always pressed, and a navy blue windbreaker that he keeps zipped halfway up regardless of the temperature. On the left side of his windbreaker, barely visible unless someone is looking closely, is a small pin that catches the sunlight on bright days. Bill moved to Greenfield 3 years ago, after his wife Margaret passed away from cancer. Their house in the old neighborhood had become too full of memories and too empty of life, so he sold it and moved into a small apartment in senior living facility near the park. The facility is comfortable, but institutional, filled with people who are marking time rather than living it, so Bill spends his days outdoors whenever possible. He chose the bench by the playground, not because he's particularly fond of children's noise, but because it reminds him of life continuing, of futures being built, of hope taking shape in small voices and running feet. After 50 years of marriage and no children of their own, Bill finds comfort in watching other people's families grow and thrive. What the neighborhood doesn't know about Bill Harrison is that the small pin on his windbreaker represents one of the highest honors the United States military can bestow. What they don't know is that the quiet old man who feeds pigeons and nods politely when people walk past spent 2 tours in Vietnam as a combat medic, saving lives under enemy fire and earning decorations that most soldiers only dream of receiving. What they especially don't know is that Bill Harrison was awarded the Silver Star for gallantry in action, the Bronze Star for heroic achievement, and 3 Purple Hearts for wounds received in combat, wounds that still ache on cold mornings and remind him daily of friends who didn't make it home. The children notice Bill more than the adults do, because children haven't yet learned to make themselves invisible to people who are different or unfamiliar. While parents hurry past with brief, polite nods, children stare with open curiosity at the man who sits so still and watches so intently. Some of the older children, the ones who've absorbed their parents' wariness about strangers, whisper among themselves about the weird old guy and create elaborate stories about why he's always there. Tommy Martinez, age 10, has convinced several younger children that Bill is probably some kind of criminal who's watching the playground for bad reasons. Jessica Chen, age 9, insists that he's definitely crazy because normal people don't just sit on benches all day doing nothing. But 8-year-old Emma Walsh sees something different when she looks at Bill Harrison. Emma is the kind of child who notices details that adults miss. She sees how Bill always stands up when the flag is raised at the elementary school across the street, how he quietly removes his hat during the national anthem at the Saturday morning Little League games, and how his eyes follow military aircraft when they occasionally fly overhead. She also notices that Bill never bothers anyone, never approaches children or tries to start conversations, and never does anything more threatening than scatter breadcrumbs for the pigeons that have learned to expect his daily visits. Most importantly, Emma notices Bill's eyes. While other children see an old man staring creepily at the playground, Emma sees sadness and loneliness, but also kindness and patience. She sees someone who watches children play with the wistful expression of someone who remembers being young, not someone who wishes he could interfere with their childhood. Emma's curiosity about Bill intensifies over several weeks of observation. She starts paying attention to his daily routine, noting that he arrives at exactly 2:30 p.m. every weekday, just as school is letting out, and stays until around 5 p.m. when families begin heading home for dinner. On weekends, he comes earlier and stays later, bringing a small brown bag with what appears to be his lunch. Emma notices that Bill always carries the same things: a small paper bag of breadcrumbs for the pigeons, a thermos that probably contains coffee, and a folded newspaper that he reads slowly, sometimes moving his lips slightly as he processes the words. She also notices that he sometimes sits with his eyes closed, not sleeping but appearing to be remembering something that makes his face look peaceful and sad at the same time. The turning point comes on a Thursday afternoon in October, when Emma is playing on the swings while her mother chats with other parents near the basketball court. Emma has been watching Bill out of the corner of her eye, as she often does when she notices something glinting in the sunlight on his jacket. Emma's natural curiosity overcomes the vague warnings she's heard from other children about staying away from the weird old man. She stops swinging and walks slowly toward Bill's bench, not with any particular plan, but simply drawn by the desire to understand what she's been observing. Bill notices Emma approaching and experiences a moment of concern, not for himself but for the child. He's aware of how his presence in the park is perceived by some parents, and he doesn't want to create any situation that might be misinterpreted or cause problems for a young girl who's probably just lost her ball or needs help with something innocent. "Hello," Emma says politely, stopping about 6 feet from the bench in the way children do when they're curious but still cautious. "Hello there," Bill responds gently, his voice carrying the careful tone adults use when they want to be friendly but appropriate with other people's children. Emma points to Bill's windbreaker, specifically to the small pin that has been catching her attention for weeks. "What's that shiny thing on your jacket?" Bill looks down at the pin, as if seeing it for the first time, though he's worn it every day for 3 years. It's such a small thing, barely larger than a quarter, but it represents memories and experiences that shaped his entire adult life. "This is a military pin," Bill says simply. "I got it when I was a soldier, a long time ago." Emma steps a little closer, her curiosity overcoming her caution. "Were you really a soldier, like on TV?" Bill smiles slightly, remembering other children who asked similar questions back when he was younger, and people still thanked veterans publicly instead of simply assuming they were too old to matter. "Yes, I was a soldier. I served in Vietnam when I was not much older than your big brother or sister." "Vietnam?" Emma repeats the word carefully, not entirely sure what it means, but sensing that it's important. "It's a country very far away," Bill explains. "There was a war there when I was young, and I went to help take care of soldiers who got hurt." Emma considers this information with the seriousness that children bring to new concepts. "Were you scared?" Bill pauses, surprised by the directness of the question and the genuine concern in Emma's voice. Most adults, when they ask about his military service, focus on abstract concepts like patriotism or duty. This child is asking about the human experience of fear, which is actually the most honest question anyone has asked him in years. "Yes," Bill says truthfully. "I was scared sometimes, but I had a job to do, taking care of people who needed help, so I tried to be brave even when I was scared." "Did you save people?" "I tried to save everyone I could." Emma absorbs this answer with the gravity it deserves. In her 8-year-old understanding of the world, saving people is what heroes do, and heroes are important and should be respected. "Are you sad?" Emma asks with the perceptiveness that children sometimes display when adults least expect it. The question catches Bill off guard. "Why do you ask that, sweetheart?" "Because sometimes when I watch you sitting here, you look sad, like when my grandpa looks at pictures of my grandma." Bill feels his chest tighten with emotion. This child has been observing him with more insight and compassion than any adult in the neighborhood has shown in 3 years. "I do get sad sometimes," Bill admits. "My wife died a few years ago, and I miss her very much. Sometimes I come to the park because watching children play reminds me that there are still good things in the world." Emma nods with understanding that seems far beyond her years. "My mom says when people die, they're still watching us from heaven, and they want us to be happy." "Your mom sounds very wise." "She is. She's a teacher." Bill and Emma talk for 15 more minutes, covering topics that range from Emma's school subjects to Bill's memories of Margaret, from the habits of park pigeons to Emma's plans for Halloween. It's the longest conversation Bill has had with anyone in months, and certainly the most genuine. When Emma's mother calls her name from across the park, signaling that it's time to go home, Emma stands up but hesitates before leaving. "Mr." she begins, realizing she doesn't know Bill's name. "Mr. Bill," he says. "And you're Emma. I've heard your mother calling you." "Mr. Bill, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why do the other kids say you're weird? You seem really nice to me." Bill considers how to answer this question honestly without burdening a child with adult prejudices and fears. "Sometimes people are afraid of things they don't understand," he says carefully. "And sometimes when people don't know someone's story, they make up their own story that might not be true. That's not fair." Emma says with the moral clarity that children possess before the world teaches them to compromise their principles. "No, it's not always fair. But that's why it's important to talk to people and learn their real stories, like you did today." Emma smiles. "I'm glad I talked to you, Mr. Bill. Can I talk to you again tomorrow?" "I'd like that very much, Emma. I'll be here." Emma runs back to her mother, and Bill watches her animated explanation of their conversation, noting how Emma's mother glances over at him with a mixture of curiosity and parental caution. The next day, Emma returns to the park with questions she's been thinking about overnight. She asks Bill about Vietnam, about being a soldier, about what it was like to help people who were hurt. Bill answers her questions with age-appropriate honesty, sharing stories of friendship and courage while leaving out the details that would give a child nightmares. Over the following weeks, Emma becomes a regular visitor to Bill's bench. Sometimes she brings her homework and asks for help with reading, which Bill is happy to provide. Sometimes she brings drawings she's made at school and explains them with the enthusiasm that children bring to their creative work. Sometimes she simply sits beside him and feeds the pigeons while telling him about her day. Other children begin to notice Emma's friendship with the weird old man, and their reactions vary. Some are curious and gradually join the conversations. Others are disapproving and warn Emma that she's making a mistake by talking to a stranger. The shift in neighborhood perception begins slowly, with observant parents noticing that their children are interacting with the elderly man on the bench, and that these interactions appear to be positive and appropriate. Emma's mother, Sarah Walsh, is among the first to recognize that her daughter has made an unusual but meaningful friendship. Sarah approaches Bill one afternoon, while Emma is on the playground, introducing herself and thanking him for being kind to her daughter. "Emma talks about you constantly," Sarah tells Bill. "She says you're a war hero and that people don't understand how special you are." Bill is embarrassed by the description, but touched by Emma's loyalty. She's a remarkable little girl, very thoughtful and mature for her age. She is, and she's also very perceptive about people. "If Emma says you're special, then I believe her." Sarah and Bill talk for 20 minutes, and by the end of their conversation, Sarah understands that the strange old man her neighbors have been wary of is actually a decorated veteran who's lonely and grieving, but poses no threat to anyone. Word spreads gradually through the neighborhood, aided by children who share their parents' conversations and adults who realize they may have misjudged someone based on superficial impressions. The transformation accelerates when Emma decides to bring Bill to school for Veterans Day. Emma's third-grade teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, has planned a Veterans Day program where students are encouraged to invite veteran family members to speak to the class about their service. Most children invite grandfathers or uncles who served in more recent conflicts, but Emma asks if she can invite her friend Mr. Bill. Emma, is Mr. Bill a member of your family? Mrs. Rodriguez asks. No, but he's my friend, and he's a real war hero. He has medals and everything, and he saved lots of people in Vietnam. Mrs. Rodriguez is intrigued, and after speaking with the principal and Emma's mother, agrees to let Emma invite Bill to participate in the Veterans Day program. When Emma asks Bill if he would come to her school, he's initially hesitant. He hasn't spoken publicly about his military service in years, and he's not sure he's the right person to represent veterans to a classroom full of 8-year-olds. Emma, I'm not really a hero, Bill says. I just did my job, like lots of other soldiers. But you saved people, Emma insists. And you were brave even when you were scared. That's what heroes do. Bill agrees to visit Emma's classroom, mostly because he can't bear to disappoint a child who has brought so much joy into his daily life. On Veterans Day, Bill arrives at Greenfield Elementary wearing his best shirt and the navy blue windbreaker with the small pin that started his friendship with Emma. He's nervous about speaking to children about experiences that still carry emotional weight after all these years. Emma introduces Bill to her classmates with pride and enthusiasm that touches everyone in the room. This is my friend Mr. Bill, she announces. He was a soldier in Vietnam, and he saved lots of people, and he has medals for being brave. Bill speaks to the children for 30 minutes, sharing stories about friendship, courage, and the importance of helping others. He explains what it means to serve your country, and why veterans deserve respect and gratitude. He talks about the soldiers he served with, emphasizing their bravery and sacrifice rather than his own contributions. When Bill shows the children his medals, the Silver Star, the Bronze Star, and the Purple Hearts, that he's brought in a small wooden box, the classroom falls completely silent. Even 8-year-olds understand that these are important honors that represent real courage and real sacrifice. Mr. So, Bill, asks Tommy Martinez, the same boy who had convinced other children that Bill was probably a criminal. I'm sorry I said you were weird. I didn't know you were a hero. You don't need to apologize, Tommy, Bill says gently. And I'm not more important than anyone else. But thank you for listening to my story. After Bill's presentation, Mrs. Rodriguez asks if he would be willing to visit other classrooms and speak to more students. Word of his visit spreads throughout the school, and within a week, Bill has been invited to speak to every grade level about military service, courage, and the importance of treating all people with respect. The impact of Bill's school visits extends far beyond the classroom. Children go home and tell their parents about the real war hero who spoke at school, and parents begin to understand that they've been overlooking someone extraordinary in their own neighborhood. The change in community perception is gradual but unmistakable. Parents who once hurried past Bill's bench now stop to chat and thank him for his service. Teenagers who once ignored him now nod respectfully when they see him in the park. Neighbors who once complained about the strange old man now speak proudly about having a decorated veteran living in their community. But the most significant change is in Bill himself. For 3 years, Bill had been existing rather than living, marking time rather than engaging with life. His friendship with Emma and the respect he's gained from the community have reminded him that his story isn't over, that he still has contributions to make and relationships to build. Bill begins volunteering at the elementary school, helping children with reading and sharing his knowledge of history and geography. He starts attending community events and neighborhood meetings, contributing the wisdom and perspective that come from a lifetime of service and experience. Most importantly, Bill discovers that the loneliness and grief that brought him to the park bench every day have been replaced by purpose and connection. He still misses Margaret terribly, but he's no longer defined by loss. Instead, he's defined by the relationships he's building and the positive impact he's having on his community. 6 months after Emma first asked about the pin on his jacket, the city of Greenfield officially honors Bill Harrison with a Community Service Award, recognizing his volunteer work with local schools and his contributions to veteran awareness programs. At the ceremony, Emma sits in the front row with her family, beaming with pride as her friend receives recognition for the qualities she recognized long before any adult in the neighborhood. Emma, Bill says during his acceptance speech, taught me that courage isn't just something soldiers show on battlefields. Sometimes courage is an 8-year-old girl who decides to talk to someone everyone else is avoiding. Sometimes courage is choosing to see the best in people instead of the worst. Bill looks out at the audience, which includes many of the neighbors who once crossed the street to avoid him. Emma reminded me that every person has a story worth knowing, and that we miss out on so much when we judge people by appearances instead of taking the time to learn who they really are. After the ceremony, Emma approaches Bill with a drawing she's made of the two of them sitting on the park bench, surrounded by pigeons and sunshine. "This is for you, Mr. Bill," she says. "So you'll always remember that you're not just a war hero, you're my hero too." Bill accepts the drawing, with tears in his eyes, understanding that this child has given him something far more valuable than recognition or community respect. She's given him the gift of seeing himself through the eyes of someone who recognized his worth when no one else was looking. 1 year later, Bill still sits on the bench in Maple Park every day, but now he's surrounded by children who stop by to share their school news, parents who seek his advice on everything from history homework to life lessons, and neighbors who consider him an essential part of their community. The bench where he once sat alone and largely ignored has become an informal community center where people gather to share stories, seek wisdom, and connect across generational lines. Bill Harrison learned that sometimes the most important battles are fought not with weapons, but with patience, kindness, and the willingness to let children teach adults about the courage it takes to see past surface appearances to the truth underneath. And Emma Walsh learned that heroes don't always wear uniforms or carry weapons. Sometimes they wear windbreakers with small pins and sit quietly on park benches, waiting for someone brave enough to ask about their story. Because the most valuable lessons often come from the most unexpected teachers, and the most important conversations often begin with the simplest questions asked by the smallest voices. If you enjoyed this story, click the like button and subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow I have another story especially for you.